Hi, and welcome to Something to Talk About. I'm Linda McNamee, and for the next hour, we are going to get a little more global, and we're going to learn about humanity, I guess is a good way to put it, but we'll find out more about that momentarily. But before I begin, as I usually begin, if you have a question later on for one of our wonderful guests, you can always give us a call at 781-270-9199. Or if you have a suggestion for a future topic or a question for later on and you didn't catch the email, you can always email me at talk@bcattv.org. I would like to thank my wonderful guests for this evening. We have, I need my cheat sheet, Jolie Atwood, Stephanie Floridas, Marie, I'm going to screw up your last name, Belanger. I said it wrong, didn't I, Marie? Okay, just checking. And Colleen Moore, director extraordinaire. And we also have staff member Chris Flaherty, whose birthday is today, so happy birthday, Christoph. Thank you for not taking your birthday off. And last but not least, I would like to thank my husband, Paul, for staying home for Daddy Date Night. Whew, business out of the way. Now, I would like to introduce my wonderful guests for this evening. We have Nadia Alawa.
Yeah.
Okay, should have asked that before. And Patricia O'Brien, who represent NuDay Syria, which is a humanitarian help organization for helping refugees, correct?
Yeah. So, NuDay Syria, we are more than just actually help or aid for Syrian mothers and children in need. Our focus is really mostly empowerment, and we say aid with dignity for mothers and children inside Syria, helping them stay in their country, survive what's going on right now, and get on with their lives basically in a stable and safe manner.
Okay. Yeah. Now, I don't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah.
But can we back up a little bit, and can you kind of tell me your backgrounds, how you came to this area, you know, the greater Boston area, and maybe why you decided to establish NuDay Syria, and then we have a little video clip that kind of...
Yeah, that was a lot of questions.
So how'd you come here?
At the same time. Well, what are we doing in Burlington, you mean, in terms of our work?
Right.
Or,
well,
you know,
I mean, are you originally from New England?
No, I'm not originally from New England. I've been in New England for close to 20 years now.
Oh,
so
okay.
This is home. I became a U.S. citizen a few years ago. Actually during the Syrian Revolution, the whole process that has been happening since 2011 with people inside Syria revolting against the dictatorial regime and wanting to have democracy and freedom of speech, the things we take for granted here. So during that process is actually when I became an American citizen. I'm originally Danish, born and raised in Denmark, and I like to tell people that so that they can get their mind off of where my accent is from. You know, they get a little bit confused.
Accent? What accent?
Well, I can't hear it. I think it sounds pretty normal, very British or New Englandish. But so my father is actually Syrian. I've never lived in Syria, but I have children that are 3/4 Syrians. My husband is Syrian, so that was my direct that is my direct connection to Syria.
Oh, okay.
So when the Syrian Revolution started in Syria over 6 years ago, it started by some middle school children writing some graffiti on their school walls, basically. That's what catapulted the humanitarian catastrophe that we have today. I was moved by that, by the fact that the children who wrote that graffiti, they were the same age as one of my children.
Wow.
My son
makes it really hit home.
Exactly, you know, not just that we have children who are suffering because of what's happening in Syria, and we are mothers ourselves, and it matters to us how other children and how other mothers they feel and how they survive. But also the fact that, it was children who were like, we want the same rights as other people. We want to be able to have freedom of speech. We just want a few things to be different. And over the years inside Syria, many of the stories that have come out have been stories of very brave children that have gone out of their way to help other children in more need than themselves. And that's something that really moved me and kept me awake at night. What are these mothers thinking? Not just do they have suffering children and babies who now are under siege and they can't get access to baby milk, but other mothers were losing their children to torture and killing by the regime because their children were brave and went out of the way to help other children.
Okay.
So that's just, my personal, really, what caught me, what really made me focus on what's going on in Syria, and that I had to make a difference.
Okay. Now, Patricia, how did you get involved in the whole thing?
So I've had the benefit of knowing Nadia for probably 15 years now. We met at the Masjid on Lexington Street, the ICB, the Burlington Mosque. I was an administrator for the weekend school, and Nadia brought a few of her several children. I can't keep count. I think she's 8, right?
I have 8 children.
Wow.
But I had 6 at that
But
time.
she had
stopped at
6 at this
2,
time. So we met at the weekend school, and then over the years kept in touch on and off a little bit to try to keep the children grounded in their Islamic roots and Muslim faith, and to continue friendships. And so it was, I like to say I was involved with NuDay Syria before it was NuDay Syria, because Nadia's heart bled early on in the process, and she just started to collect things to send to Syria. And that was, in 2011, maybe? And at that point, we had a weekend school on Ray Ave. By the Kindercare. And so the Arabic weekend school had moved, and Nadia needed space to help sort clothing and donations and load up boxes. And
it was 2012, just start of 2013. We had some fun experiences.
Yeah, so
basically I did 5 containers in 3 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like when you say containers, it's like the tractor trailer
the
40
size.
foot.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
And we had the help of a few schools and a few wonderful people like Patricia, who made sure that some schools would open up, and we got volunteers.
Okay.
Now,
I don't want to cut you off, but I would like to take a look at this clip just so the audience really understands before we go into more of the details. So Colleen, if you can show us the Hope for Our Syria clip, that would be wonderful.
سألهم طفلهم في آخرها ما هذا؟ أجابوا خيمة سودا شي مسلول، هاد بيتك المربوط بحبال وهي حالتك صحرا وجبال، وكل مين سألك عن عنوان قلهم ضاع، أنا بلا عنوان ما عاد اسم بابا عالباب، بابا استشهد وما عاد في باب، وعلى حيط خيمة القماش في وجع عم بئن، في حرفين زل كبار بيتهلوا وين، في إلك ماما اسمها سوريا، هي مو هون، هاي هنيك مطرح ما النار عم تطلع، مطرح ما الدخان عم يطلع، صرخات وآهات وأرواح عم تطلع، كل ما توجعت حاكيها وناديها، فشلها قلبك، فشلها حلمك، لا يا مو سوريا أنا جوعان وبردان، أنا تعبان وعطشان، بدي مي، بدي في، بدي أحضنك ياما وأغمزك وأتخبى، بدي شمك ياما وبحضناتك أتربى، بدي آكل من زيتك وزعترك ومربى، يا ويلي شو طيب فيك المربى، بدي آكل من خبزك، يا ام سوريا يا
is like really powerful, so I can understand why you want to help. But where do you begin? I mean, how do you decide what is best to send over there? What can you send over?
So NuDay Syria does many different projects, not just containers, the humanitarian aid containers. What you saw in this video, you saw some footage of the kind of shellings that's still happening right now.
Okay.
And has been happening, for all this period of time, where people are just completely losing their lives and barely being able to dig out, a live child, their baby, from the rubbles.
And it's innocent people that are being affected.
Innocent
it's not
people,
just, government.
No, so that's there's a lot of politics, a lot of military, but the bottom line is that these are innocent people that are being affected. Inside Syria, a country of, less than 23 million people, around 30 million people have been displaced, and of those, 5 million are external refugees.
Wow. Okay.
So over half of the country has lost their home, and most everybody else is affected.
Okay.
So what you saw in the video here, first you saw there was a camp and there was this beautiful girl who was reading a poem.
Right.
And behind her there were standing different children, and they were each holding a sign actually of the hometown that they were from.
Oh, okay.
Because,
I was wondering what the signs were.
People have been displaced from all over Syria. Many of them have gone to areas in northern Syria.
Okay.
Where traditionally there were less bombings until, recently, since November. So in those areas you don't have ISIS on the ground, for example. So non-profit organizations have had, some leeway of working in those areas without, being affected by a lot of air shellings, for example. So you saw that the tents, you could see a little bit of tents in the background. That's how many displaced people are living.
Okay.
And initially, when we started working in this particular area, probably about a year and a half ago, in this particular area.
Do you focus on like one area?
No, we are in many different areas.
Okay, so this particular area.
But this particular area, it's in the countryside of Idlib. When we went there, we saw the tents. I said, why would we just do tents? Why would we support them living in tents? Let's do housing. Let's do a pilot project for housing.
So
and those were the homes where
you
you saw that they were built homes.
Yeah.
These were almost ready homes. And we built a mosque in that area, and actually a school also in an area where women families, that's families that don't have a male breadwinner, displaced women families would be able to go and live under some security and safety. And then how do containers play a role in all of this, right?
Well, how does everything play a role in this? Just tell me more.
Well, when
I don't need my questions.
You see the kids at the end, they're driving on bicycles. I don't know if you noticed that. Those bicycles came from Maine, for example.
Oh, wow.
I mean, we happen to know that they came from Maine because we're following the containers and the footage we got at that point in time. It's not always that we can say we know where this stuff came from, right? But those bicycles came from Maine, where we have, another board member, actually, who also is an activist, meaning a community activist in her town there. And she has been collecting for NuDay Syria. She became really involved because she wanted to make a difference. She was watching what was happening in Syria, went online and put in containers. Is it even possible to send containers to Syria? And up popped NuDay Syria.
Okay.
So she, like many other people actually also here in Massachusetts, and people like Patricia and, other people have been collecting items, keeping stuff out of landfills. But not only that, they have also encouraged children to go home and say, when I go into my room, I have so many toys, I don't need all of these toys.
Right.
My own 6-year-old daughter, when she gets a new stuffed animals, she knows that there are children that don't have. And she will say on her own accord, I am going to donate for Syria, and she'll go home and fill, a bag of stuff. And that's the beautiful thing when children, they start to think about other children in need, and not just, I want more, I want more, I want more.
A lot of times I think it's the kids that have a lot to teach the grown-ups, too.
Absolutely.
So now with the containers, on a much smaller scale, I keep thinking about, people bringing suitcases to other areas of the world and getting stuff confiscated. And what kind of customs or policies do you have to go through to make sure that the container can arrive safely and then that everything in there gets distributed to the people who need it?
Yeah, those are very important questions. Prior to NuDay Syria, as we just mentioned, I did 5 containers, right?
Okay.
And before I did those 5 containers, I spent months thinking about the process of how do you do this, and which laws do we have to follow. And at that time, initially, I went with other organizations because I wasn't going to start my own organization. At that time,
probably not, the first thing. I'm going to start a nonprofit.
Well, I was doing so much stuff that eventually it became like, this is the next step because we need to continue. We're using Nadia, Alawa's network of people that we work with inside Syria, even through these other organizations. So that was part of the process. But basically, when you have a container, the way NuDay Syria works and the way I've been working all the time is that everything is sorted and packed into different categories. So there's a very detailed packing list. This ensures that you don't send weird items.
Okay.
Items
you can take a...
that's fine,
Make Patricia do some of the work.
She will talk, in a few minutes, but I'm sure. So that we send, stuff that's, not red, not bad, and are for humanitarian aid purposes, right?
Okay, right.
And then when we load each container, we check off everything that's loaded.
Okay, now do you send food as well, or is it like
we do send food.
Okay.
We send also medical supplies, many different kinds of items, and there's specific regulations. So once I started my own organization, NuDay Syria, obviously, you have a board and you have regulations, and now you have to be studying all this stuff and exactly what about containers, right? So there's something called an OFAC license, for example, that you need to have. You need to work with a shipper, a custom clearance shipper agency, in the receiving country. In the instance of Syria, everything goes through Turkey.
Okay.
And that has really facilitated this process so that custom clearance happens in Turkey, and that's where our agent is and where they work.
Okay.
And then it goes into Syria, and in Syria, of course, there is some paperwork, but it's not with the government, it's with the opposing, the opposition government sitting there. So there's some paperwork there. So there's, clear guidelines for what you can send, how to send it, what people want to see, what the government in the US needs, and what the government, in Turkey needs to see, and what the people inside Syria, what they want, and for their dignity. Like, they don't want expired food, like we don't want expired food. And then we have our partners. NuDay Syria has different offices inside Syria. We work with very specific partners. We have a lot of guidelines they have to follow, documentation, lots of photos.
How did you find out about all these partnering organizations and the regulations? I mean, is it readily available, or did you really have to do a lot of digging?
Yeah, of course you have to do a lot of digging. And
sounds a little overwhelming.
Well, I spent a year setting up a network inside Syria prior to starting NuDay Syria.
Now, did you have to travel overseas?
No, I haven't traveled. I've worked with people, for example, that were part of the original movement in Syria, and we're talking across religion, so it could be a Christian Syrian that was imprisoned with a Muslim Syrian, and then now there's a revolution and they have the same goal, that they want freedom in their country. So there's a level of trust that you find when people have been in prison for 12 years together, for example, like they were there for the same reason, doesn't matter what their religion was. Or expat Syrians that, still have contact to people there, people who were out on the streets risking their lives, then they moved to humanitarian processes inside Syria. People who are now involved with the local councils inside Syria, where, where when you don't have the government on the ground anymore, people have started local councils. So, it's not like one person working over here in a corner. It's very transparent, and everybody that work with NuDay Syria, they are vetted, and there's a process. And it's not a one-time process. It's a continuous process.
Because I'm just, overwhelmed by the fact that you were able to single-handedly start this whole organization.
Well, obviously not single-handedly. I've had,
Well, yeah, but finding the help.
Initially, the way NuDay Syria...
you spearheaded it, so...
Yeah. Initially, with, the fundraising that was happening for Syria from my side in 2012. And NuDay Syria was founded in 2013, but in that 1 year when I started setting up rallies and creating awareness, and outrage about what was happening, I also started fundraising. So many people knew me from before, and they knew me locally, but I also have like friends across the United States, and people they wanted to know. And Facebook was a big part of this actually, where I was getting information and people were getting information from me and trying to understand the process. And when you know someone, it's easier to start going through their process as they develop it and, they process what's happening.
Okay.
So, initially there were many people, not many people, but there were people that would get very upset when they, I would post pictures of children that were killed or something in Syria. But it was part of the process of really understanding what was happening in Syria and feeling sympathy. Me personally...
And I think that's a big issue because it's like, I really, I'm afraid to watch the news, but it doesn't seem like we're receiving a lot of news, a lot of headlines about what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, 6 years ago in Syria, when people went out rallying on the streets, they were met by machine guns and people were literally killed, and they would even show it like live on Facebook. This is happening right now. And you would think that people would react, that the world would react, but it didn't happen.
Right.
So at some point you become like, I need to show pictures of this child that has been killed, or this mother that's crying over her child or something.
Right.
Because I need to let people know what's happening. Sometimes you would look at the pictures and you would be like, if this were my child...
If people saw this.
No, if it had been my child, would I want others to look at it? But...
Oh, yeah, okay, I see.
But
I
maybe...
I think there was a big shift at some point, and I can't say exactly when it was for NuDay Syria, but Nadia's message of hope and humanity really is what taps into people's spirit of giving. And so, I remember in the early days when there were these postings of scenes that you quickly clicked away or scrolled through because you feel the pain. And that happened for a little while, but I think a lot of people then just turned and listened to Nadia's message about hope. And the fact that, that we're sending items, tangible things, providing aid, building schools, giving community, empowering mothers. The fact that that's really what the focus is. It's you're in a tragic situation and we want to help. And that they know that there's somebody outside of their borders who's willing to help. That the people in the world are listening. Because if you listen to commentary from this past December in the Aleppo situation, they feel like the world has let them down.
Right.
And when I think about that, I think that they clearly are talking about government and institutions that are supposedly in place to protect people from these kinds of tragedies. But Nadia's message and NuDay Syria's message is about hope and humanity and wanting for your brother what you want for yourself, and being able to send something and for them to pick it up and say, this is from somebody like a world away. They care.
It like adds the
they care, and it brings hope to them also. So I think it's important to remember that there was a shift. I mean, I remember the days there was like, the little boy on the shore, that. I think after that it became
real.
Well, for a lot of people it became real. For those of us who've been following
for
it,
a few
been
weeks
for a
it
lot.
became real.
It became real, and then it went away. But the hope, the momentum that NuDay Syria has, once she announced that there was this organization, because you're right, she did a lot of behind-the-scenes work. She continues to be the lifeblood of the organization. Everything flows through Nadia because she understands all of the pieces, and there's many moving pieces. And you heard her talk about her network. That means she's in contact with people in Syria, in a different time zone, all hours of the day and night, and then dealing with the wonderful individuals here who want to help. And it's a high school kid. She was just telling me a story actually about somebody she was talking to, and they want to do something.
Right.
But
and it also
they like the connection with Nadia, and
like you had also said, with the containers, it's tangible. So younger kids can relate. Like you
I
said,
mean,
your
the
6-year-old.
first time I sent off some infant formula, and I could
Right.
see what the kind of cans they were, and I saw them inside Syria. It was magical.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, seeing these
It's- yeah.
bicycles, we know they came from Maine, and my friend, she picked them out of the dumpster, she took them home, and she fixed them up, and
Wow.
that touches people.
Yeah.
Like I can make a difference, and you see these children now, they're riding bicycles.
Yeah.
They don't have
They
to.
have a life again.
They do.
They can be children
They
again.
They
do.
can be
They
children,
don't have
yeah.
to worry. They have a few moments where they're riding a
Yeah.
bicycle.
Yeah.
The stuffed animals. I mean, we have a big campaign for stuffed animals. Stuffed animals doesn't have a value. It's
I
$5.
might be able to help you out there.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, you have children that haven't had a
Have
stuffed
more
animal.
stuffed
Yeah.
animals than I know what to do with.
Well, I'll bring it home to Burlington on that comment, because the Burlington Mass Parent Network
Okay. Yep.
Facebook page, I've been posting to them only since about 2015.
Okay.
But you asked also how do you decide what goes?
Right,
Well,
yeah.
you decide, you think about what they're going through, and you realize they need just about everything.
Okay.
Right? They need just about everything. If you
Because there's,
if
there's
you
a
walk a-
finite space in that container. So how do you decide?
Well, then we send another container.
then we send
Oh,
another
okay.
container.
Problem solved.
But when
Exactly.
you decide what they need, you
Mhm.
think, I left my home with a suitcase and a backpack and carrying my child. And so
Oh.
what do you think they need when they get to wherever they land? And thankfully, there are refugee camps, and NuDay Syria sponsors.
Because that's
these
kind of another
things,
question
yeah.
that I have is, in the video that we saw, they had, substantial, housing. They're not staying in tents anymore.
Well,
But when NuDay Syria built that, how did they know where to put it? That it wouldn't be destroyed in 2 months, 6 months?
Well, any work in Syria, there's no guarantee.
Okay.
But you do the best you can. I mean, we are in the nonprofit business, right?
Mhm.
Because we believe in giving hope, we believe in providing stability, and in helping these children get on with their lives, and these mothers look for a future for their children. There are no guarantees. We go through a lot, each of us in the organization, every single volunteer, every single person, we go through a lot to send those containers, to collect funds for a house like that. I mean, it's a very basic home.
But
So
you
we
still,
wouldn't-
need basic necessities.
Well,
like,
we wouldn't be doing all of that if we didn't
Yeah.
feel that it's a somewhat safe area, and
Okay.
everything has been vetted. We can't guarantee airstrikes, but there's a high probability
Okay.
that this particular area, a mountainous area,
It's safer.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we are working in this area.
Okay.
And that's why you have tens of thousands of people that congregate then to those areas, and they move towards those areas.
Okay.
Now NuDay Syria is here. We're providing all this. This is a pretty safe area. It has no strategic value. There's no military personnel. There's nothing really of value
Okay.
in
So,
in that sense, other than
Okay.
human beings and their lives.
but who knows who's rational?
Yeah.
Government isn't exactly rational. Okay. Sorry. Not going to get political. Not going to get. Okay. Tell me more about the containers. Like,
I'm going to talk about the stuffed animals.
Stuffed
so
animals,
we stay
yes.
off of the
Stuffed
political
animals.
scene. So I posted to, so I follow that page, and somebody was asking in Burlington. I
right.
have a bunch of stuffed animals. None of the local charities will take them for
Right.
whatever reason. And so,
Just
you
for the
know-
record, I was not that person. Although
Well-
I do have a boatload of stuffed animals.
so I responded, and several people responded with different
Okay.
organizations that they thought would benefit
Mhm.
from them. And so I responded, and we
Hey,
got
Why not?
many donations of stuffed animals and bags of stuffed animals, and people writing. And recently Nadia posted a picture of the refugees with the stuffed animals, and so I reposted that to the page. And
Okay.
you can see that people are paying attention to that. You count by likes right now. So when I first posted, I had 15 likes. When I
Okay.
posted something about NuDay Syria, it's up to 60 or so, I think, these
Sweet.
days. And so I just think that the word is starting to get out
Okay.
a little bit more in the community, because there are many members of the community who've been involved with container work.
Mhm.
But the stuffed animals, we also did a drive for the Halloween candy. So
Oh,
you
fun.
also find ways to connect to the culture here.
Okay.
Like, how can we give? Because we all know there's too much Halloween candy, and people like, oh, can I sell it to my dentist? Well, you know what? A kid in Syria is gonna love that, because they likely haven't had something sweet in a while. And yeah, and I think that there's a clip somewhere, or it's just a snapshot, and it's a child who has a candy bar, and they're actually sharing it.
Wow.
And to me, that's just so touching, because here, oftentimes we're not sharing.
Mine.
We're
Although, speaking of clips, I think we do have a clip of when you were talking about stuffed animals, one of the containers, Colleen's video 6, the container, the fun distribution. So it talks about, you know, the stuffed animals and juice boxes and
cool.
stuff like that. So if it's okay, can we
That'll be
check
wonderful
that out
to
right
see,
now?
yeah.
Yeah.
جزيل الشكر لمنظمة NuDay Syria على تعاونها ومساهمتها الدائمة مع إدارة المخيم على كافة المجالات.
So with something like that clip, what happens if you run out of stuff? Like on that day? I mean, yes, you can ship another container over, but that's going to take time.
Well, I mean, it has been calculated that this many children, and you know, we bring this number of children, you know, for this amount of
Because the poor
stuff.
kids have been through so much that, you know, I can just picture,
I
you
mean,
know,
that's part of the process.
20 toys and the 21st kid is like,
Yeah.
where's mine?
Yeah.
You know, so how do you decide?
I mean, there's a lot of work that goes behind, you know,
Okay.
setting up different, you know, distributions. It's not
Okay.
just random.
Now, the village with like the dorm style, you know, the cement buildings, does NuDay Syria just have one of those, or do you have like several throughout?
No, I mean, this is one pilot project.
Okay.
And it took a while because everything was procured and you know,
Okay.
built inside Syria. So
Okay.
this actually created jobs for people, and they had to open a factory and, you know, have the different materials made and transported. So it was a big project and interesting in many ways. This was made possible because we did a lease on the mountain,
Okay.
so that, you know, there was some land that was available.
Okay.
That's possible in some situations, not always. You want, you know, just like any other situation.
Okay.
And it has to be feasible economically also. But it's certainly something we want to replicate either the same way or in a different way to help families move into actual housing and get on with their lives.
Okay, so, you know, you just kind of mentioned, you know, creating jobs, and can we kind of expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, for example, with schools.
Okay, schools. Let's talk about school.
So I'm a home educator myself, and I know
Okay.
Patricia, she is involved with, you know, local Islamic weekend schools. Education is very important to us, you know, in general as mothers. And for Syria, Syrians traditionally have been, you know, it's a very educated country. People really value education. And during the period of the Syrian revolution, you know, the first couple of years from 2011 onwards, everything really was on a standstill. People were getting bombed, people were moving around, so school wasn't a priority. Many of the families that became refugees because they needed the children to get a future, you know, by going to school and getting on with their lives. But then a couple of years ago, we started really seeing a shift where people inside Syria, you know, via talking to our partners, would tell us that they needed schools for their children.
Okay.
So they wanted something more than the informal kind of homeschooling settings or tutoring settings that NuDay Syria, for example, have been supporting. They wanted to feel like their children were going to school.
Well, because there's also like the whole social component in addition to the educational component as well, or at least
And
you
for
know.
them, you know, for many of the people there, their lives have been hijacked, and they need to get on with their
The
lives.
support system too.
Yeah, even, you know, still there is a consideration with safety, because schools have been bombed by the regime. You know,
Wow,
they have been
okay.
targeted the same way as hospitals. So there was some concern, but, you know, you need to go to school before it gets bombed, so you need to, you know, go through with the experience first. So
Yeah,
what
that's
we started
motivation.
doing, initially we started just supporting, you know, in different ways, or containers were sending items. But in about, I would say, the past year and a half or 2 years, we have started schools, we have built a physical, you know, some physical schools, or refurbished school buildings,
Okay.
caravans, you know, completely refurbished them, gotten furniture, you know, set up, staff, everything. So all the schools are just basically run from NuDay Syria. And this creates jobs for the women. Most of the teachers are women,
Okay.
traditionally speaking. Starts their economy, and now they can provide for their children, and their own children can go to school.
Okay.
So that's very exciting, actually.
Okay. So, like, you know, when they actually, why don't we check out a clip of the schools?
Yeah.
I think video 4 is the students can't wait to go to school.
Sure.
I would love to show that to my kids.
مدرستنا مدرستنا جينا ورجعنا لك يلي بالحب جمعتنا والله اشتقنا لك مدرستنا مدرستنا جينا ورجعنا لك يلي بالحب جمعتنا والله اشتقنا لك مدرستنا روعة مدرستنا روعة مدرستنا روعة مدرستنا روعة نشاط وهمة كلنا رجعنا نملى صفنا نتسابق الجوابنا لما تقولي سؤالي نشاط وهمة كلنا رجعنا نملى صفنا نتسابق الجوابنا لما تقولي سؤالي مدرستنا مدرستنا جينا ورجعنا لك يلي بالحب جمعتنا والله اشتقنا مدرستنا مدرستنا جينا ورجعنا لك يلي بالحب جمعتنا والله اشتقنا لك.
بإذن الله تم افتتاح مدرسة جيل المستقبل بحلقتين، الحلقة الأولى الابتدائية والحلقة الثانية الإعدادية. الابتدائي بالصف الأول الرابع، الإعدادي من الصف الخامس إلى الصف التاسع الإعدادي. وقمنا اليوم بتسليم الهدايا والقرطاسية إلى الطلاب بإذن الله مستمرين، ونتوقع كل مدارس الليل يربنا بالقطاعات الخاصة فيها.
مدرستنا مدرستنا جينا ورجعنا لك يلي بالحب جمعتنا والله اشتقنا مدرستنا مدرستنا جينا ورجعنا لك يلي بالحب جمعتنا.
Again, you know, my mindset and my experience has been with the educational culture here. So with the educational culture there, how do you determine curriculum, and, you know, is it grades and classes, you know, like first grades together, second grades together? Is it more integrated, or
No,
how
it's
are the
yeah.
schools structured?
I mean, they're pretty traditional in a country like Syria.
Okay.
So there are some modifications in the curriculum, but they still want to be able to integrate into the regular school system,
Okay.
assuming that something would happen and, you know, everything would be peaceful in Syria again.
Okay.
So there's some modifications, but not a lot. It's you know, it's not a creative school setting. We're not trying to reinvent the educational experience, even though it might be fun. But you know, you can only.
But I'm
do
just, you
so
know,
much
if
from
everything's been destroyed, I
Well,
mean,
I
how do
mean-
you get textbooks, and what do you know?
I mean, everything is possible. In this case here, this school is interesting because it's made out of caravan buildings, actually, that another organization had
Okay.
brought in several years ago and just left, and then,
I like the bright colors and
well,
paintings
that's
and
something we
everything,
brought in.
Yeah.
But they left the caravan buildings and they said, oh, we're not, like, we lost interest, basically. And
but-
we were,
We'll take them.
well, we were contacted, you know, if we want to support this system, and this school system and this whole project, and we had to redo everything, you know, clean out the abandoned buildings, fix them up, and all those paintings, I mean, were made, in a couple of weeks. This whole school
Wow.
was set up in a
It's
couple
very
of weeks.
cheery.
It's very cheery.
If you can get cheery in a war zone.
It's very cheery, and the fun thing about this project is that it's supported initially by a church in Western Massachusetts.
Oh,
So
okay.
there was a church that contacted us and said, then there was a woman in the church was like, I have to do something for Syrian children. What kind of project can we support? And I said, well, yes, a school. If you want to support this, that would be awesome.
Because I'm thinking, just teacher training,
Well,
if you take these people who may or may not have been teachers.
Well, that's what I think is important to remember as part of the organization's goal is to empower people and to
Okay.
bring them back to what their life was before this happened to them.
Okay.
And I often forget, though, Nadia talks about, we're going to make contact and do this project or this project, and my mind goes to, well, how are they going to do that? But we need to remember that the people who were affected by this are really all, they came from normal lives.
Yeah,
they were
they've already been
professionals,
teachers
they were
and-
doctors, they were
okay.
engineers, they were running gas stations, they were bakers, they were teachers, they were dentists, and they just happen to be displaced right now. And so to give them the
Yeah, I'm
tools.
sorry for
No, I do
the
it.
mental
I do
block.
it. No, I do it all the time myself. That's why it's so important to do this kind of work, is like to empower people, not to look at them with pity. I mean, of course we have sympathy for them, but we really know they just need tools. They need tools to bring their life back to whatever best level they can achieve,
Yeah.
given their circumstance.
Right.
And to not just, here, you need us. It's not.
I know
it's
it,
a hard,
I just can't do it.
Yeah. So I
okay.
think when we look at that school setting, those
Okay.
teachers in the organization of like giving out things and how organized they are, it's critical to remember that, they were doing that before the bombings. They
Okay.
were running schools and, and they have all that background. They just need the support in the financial and the tangible items.
Part of it is exactly what you're saying, and then I'm also thinking if you're displaced, there may not be the position that you've trained for, so you have to adapt. So is there some of both of that at all?
Of course,
do you know what
people
I'm
have to
saying?
adapt all the time. You have highly educated people who now
Okay.
are doing nothing, or they're doing something very basic, and that's part of the frustration process. But
Okay.
again, people, they need to get on with their lives, and they just have to do the next thing, and they're usually doing it.
Now, one of the things that triggered me when I was, looking through the website was, I understand, now that you're explaining this to me, I understand that you want to bring them back, but are there the resources available to pay them? Do they get how do you provide a salary for these people that will allow them to get back on their feet to the cost of living or to the level that they were used to living before? I mean, if there's
Well,
still a war going on, I mean.
That's what we as a nonprofit organization do. We are, giving them wages. It's
Okay.
not the same wages that they would have earned otherwise.
Okay.
But it's as close to, what makes sense
Okay.
with the way life is going on right now. Obviously, more funding, more donations would mean that we would
Okay.
be able to do more. But in the beginning, we were just having teachers work voluntarily, but it really wasn't sustainable, and people.
Okay.
They would help, but it was at a very grassroots level, and you needed something more formal, and you need people now to get on with their lives despite what's happening, and not to rely on charity, but to feel that they're empowered themselves. And in order
and I
to
think
do
that's
that,
kind of
Yeah.
where
so we try to
I need
pay
to make
fair
that
wages,
connection.
and of course we don't have 20 schools if we can only support
Right.
10 schools, right? It has to be to make sense.
because I'm just, I have this mental block where it's like, okay, when will your organization be done? I mean, and give everything back to them instead of having them rely on NuDay Syria. I mean, do
So I
you
wouldn't
want
say
to
that
be?
we're not having like a reliance
Okay.
relationship.
Oh, okay.
We are there to support them.
Okay.
Patricia, she's talking about empowerment. Obviously, we are funding the school, but they're really running the school. We just make sure that they follow some basic guidelines.
Okay.
including at least 50% should be girls, for example. We have some
Okay.
requirements that we need to have fulfilled because
Okay.
the projects are funded by us, but still we are not putting ourselves onto them and saying it has to be
Okay.
done our way, or you have to do 3 hours of, I don't know, art every week or something because I love art and it has to be done my way. Like,
Okay.
you have to give people some space also. It's
Okay.
both their cultural and religious issues and regional issues, and you want to
Okay.
work around that while you still fulfill what is your mandate and what you believe in as an organization. But our main thing really is empowerment, and that's a big, that's, like it's in everything that we do, that we don't want
Okay.
you to just do or to just receive. We want you to feel it and to take ownership.
Okay. I'm just having that
I mean,
mental
when they
block
go
of
and draw-
trying,
yeah.
how do you get there, I think
Well,
is,
it's a valid point. I mean, I have no idea. I'm not good with the numbers. Nadia is
Yeah.
much closer to the organization in terms of knowing all
Okay.
of the projects and the numbers of refugees. But obviously, there are still many people who we haven't reached to empower them,
Okay.
and they are, working the best they can in the system. And I
Okay.
think they get creative within camps, and families
Okay.
start to try to cook, and they trade that cooking with somebody who can do something else. I mean, I really don't know.
Okay.
I've heard small stories like
Okay.
this, but again, it's the bigger the network can grow,
Okay.
the more we can recognize that that's what they need. They need empowerment, they need funding to get themselves back on their feet,
Okay.
because of course, it's a
The
very
thing is
difficult
also
thing to
when
do
you
in a
sit
camp.
as a refugee, of course, when you're inside Syria, you're called displaced. You're not called refugee. When you
Yeah.
leave the border of your country, you're a refugee.
okay.
But whether you're displaced or a former refugee, when you just sit and you sit and you sit for years, in a helpless situation, it feels temporary. You don't see that as that job opportunities, or you might be so depressed that you really can't get over your grief or your trauma or what's going on. Well, that affects you, and several years sitting like that, it's going to affect whether or not you're going to end up being able to really become productive again.
Okay.
And that's something we want to prevent from happening.
Okay.
That's why when NuDay Syria was, when we started NuDay Syria, we had a lot of emphasis on social business projects for women in Turkey, for example.
Okay.
And now we're moving towards doing that inside Syria to do more things inside Syria in terms of social business,
Okay.
so that more women can have a chance of
Now,
helping themselves.
Can you define social business?
So social business would be something like we support, for example, we set up a place with sewing machines and we help them get started,
Okay.
and we would support that over a period of time
Okay.
while they were being paid fair trade wages,
Okay.
with a business model where eventually they would be running it, on a self-sustaining basis.
Okay.
So you start, slowly, and you help women. And usually social business projects in those areas also have a strong psychosocial aspect
Okay.
to it, because they need the support, they need to be with other women, and they need to move on with their lives and have someone who is more stable, who can, guide them, also emotionally and, with a skill also.
Now, again, when I was reading the website and I was finding out about, the sewing and, the products that they're making, I mean, is it kept within the country, or are they starting like an export partnership with other countries? Where does that go?
We have been doing a lot of knitting in Turkey and
Okay.
bringing that to here. It hasn't been formal. It's not a formal export situation where
Okay.
we have been selling it here, basically like a donation. And
Okay.
it was a donation, and women were being sustained in that manner. We did something funny in Turkey. It wasn't funny. It was really fun. It was fun to do, but we have been providing winter coats for children in Turkey.
Okay.
And then instead of buying, coats in Turkey, we had women sew those coats, and the women who were working in that social business project, they were seamstresses themselves back in Syria, so they
Okay.
knew what they were doing, and we would buy the materials, and we had, dozens of women working, and so we had one year where all the coats were provided in Turkey. That was
Cool.
it was fun, and we had like local merchants that wanted to buy actually.
Okay.
That project was put on hold this past year just out of logistics and expanding on a school we run in Turkey. But it gave us a taste of how easily it's possible to get these women working.
Okay.
As long as you keep fair trade in mind, obviously, and you don't take advantage, because that's obviously happening in other instances.
Okay.
If you're not a nonprofit organization.
Okay. Now, we've mentioned Syria and we mentioned Turkey, and you've mentioned displaced versus refugee.
Mm-hmm.
How much of your work gets done outside of Syria? Because we've been talking a lot about the containers.
Mm-hmm.
Do they just go to Syria? Do they also go to help people in Turkey? And are there other countries involved with NuDay Syria?
The niche of Syria, other than our focus on women and children, is really to stay inside Syria.
Okay.
Because we really want to help people stay in their home country. We do work in Turkey, but it's very small, on a very small level compared to what we do in Syria. And then by default, we are here in New England, and in Massachusetts there are many issues with refugees, resettlement issues.
Okay.
So we are helping several cases, both on a personal basis and also on a general scale with different things. In containers, humanitarian aid containers, medical aid containers, they only go to inside Syria.
Okay.
And we've done a little bit in Lebanon, a little bit in Jordan. But then we decided we don't want to spread ourselves everywhere.
Okay.
We need
to focus.
We have such good work going on inside Syria, and a lot of organizations pulled themselves out. And at the same time, we were just like enhancing and improving and fine-tuning on our documentation process and how we were vetting people who work for us, that we feel very confident about our work inside.
Okay. You say focus, and I'm like thinking, but I'm reading your website, and there's like so much that you're actually doing, between the establishing schools and establishing home and the containers and the medical treatment.
That's what happens when you're multitasking mothers. You have all these balls in the air.
So we do only have a few minutes left now, but I do want to let the audience know that this conversation will continue, because we will be covering, I have 3 pages of questions here, and I haven't looked at them once, but this work is really valuable, and I'm just, in the few minutes that we have left now, I'm thinking, when you started this, it seems like you've expanded really quickly. Is that just my perception, or did you really do that? And it seems like this is a huge organization, and looking at some of the videos, you have marketing.
We are a huge organization, and we're doing amazing work. And we have
time to pat yourself on the back.
Well, we have an incredibly low overhead. Actually, our overhead is 1% or something like that, and we get all of this done. That's part of why we do what we do. We really want to make sure that the aid goes to where it's needed.
Okay.
The growth has been exponential. The work is nonstop, but it's because we have a good team and a great team, and a lot of volunteers, a lot of donors that really believe in our mission and support our work for women and children.
Okay.
And they love the photos. They love the sense of connection that they get when they go to our Facebook page.
Okay. Now, if somebody wanted to participate in NuDay Syria, either as a donor or a volunteer, is that information on your website, and where would they go, and what kind of things or people or skills are you looking for? That's kind of a loaded question, I know.
You can go to the website, and you can follow, if you're on Facebook, you can follow NuDay Syria on Facebook. And I would say that we would welcome anyone and everyone with any kind of skill that they might have. As long as there's an interest in helping humanity, then you are welcome.
That's a given.
Yeah, well, sometimes it's not. But
really? Oh, okay.
But I think that there are containers now, maybe twice, sometimes 3 times a month. There's always sorting and packing to do. That gets posted to the website, not to the Facebook page. It doesn't get posted to the website. There are fundraisers in this area, usually in the spring and then in the fall.
Okay.
And there's always ongoing campaigns that you can just go to PayPal, through the website and go to PayPal or Razoo or
mail it
trying
to-
to keep up with all of the online fundraising.
I just know that
But-
PayPal doesn't like me. So now you
And
mentioned
you can always
fundraisers.
drop at 1 Oak Street in Burlington.
Oh, there you go. Which also is information available on the website. Now you mentioned a spring fundraiser.
Yeah, we usually have a fundraiser. We're going to have our fundraiser in Lowell, May 20th.
Okay.
So that's like a formal event, but that's it.
Is it like a auction or
No,
is it
it's
a
a dinner. It's a
Okay.
formal fundraiser where we show what
Black
we
tie?
do. Not black tie.
No.
Well, you said formal. I don't know how formal
Well, it's
is.
formal, if you have to, dress up a little bit.
Okay. Oh, you mean I have to wear grown-up shoes?
Exactly.
Now, is that information posted on the website as well? If people
Yeah, we
wanna-
put on the website, but really our Facebook page is really
Okay.
where everything is
So
happening.
Facebook is
Facebook is
go
probably the most.
to Facebook. Go to Facebook. Okay. So, and is it just that one fundraiser, or do you do
We
other
have
fundraisers?
ongoing. I mean,
Ongoing.
the need in Syria for help, or for sponsoring containers is ongoing. For supporting these schools, this is an ongoing need. And a lot of people, they get that. They'll go to their, community or their church or their synagogue or their mosque and say, there's this particular project, or we have to do something for children. They're freezing
Okay.
right now. And they'll collect, and then they'll mail us a check, for example, or they will tell people about our work, and everybody
Okay.
will donate. The formal fundraisers, it is more sort of everybody, let's see, I want to show you what we've been doing in the past year, and I want you to feel good about everything, and so that will continue the work, you will still support us. But it's on an ongoing basis that funds are needed.
Okay. Well, we are just about out of time, so thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
And I would like to thank everyone for tuning in this evening. I hope you have been inspired by the work of these wonderful women, and I will see you around town. Thanks. Good night.